A 15-year-old girl is found guilty of murdering a mother and daughter in Spalding in Lincolnshire last year. Elizabeth Edwards and 13-year-old Katie Edwards had been stabbed and smothered by the girl and her teenage boyfriend. The two are thought to be the youngest ever couple in Britain to be convicted of murder. We'll be speaking to our correspondent who was in court. Also this lunchtime. The rate of inflation has risen by its highest amount in almost 2 years. Prices, particularly for clothing and petrol, went up by 0.4%. A mental health trust is criticised for failing to prevent 10 killings by patients in 9 years. Iraqi and Kurdish forces say they've captured 10 villages in the battle to retake the city of Mosul. And an aide to a Conservative MP has been arrested on suspicion of rape following an alleged attack in a parliamentary office.
Here, 9 arrests in dawn raids in Oxford in connection with historical child sexual exploitation. And a treasure trove of Jurassic life, 2,000 fossils discovered by an amateur collector in Dorset.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. A 15-year-old girl has been found guilty of murdering a mother and daughter who were killed as they slept. Elizabeth Edwards and her 13-year-old daughter Katie Edwards were killed in Spalding, Lincolnshire last April. The teenager, who cannot be named because of her age, had denied the murders on grounds of diminished responsibility. Her boyfriend, also aged 15, had already admitted the killings. The teenagers are thought to be Britain's youngest ever couple to be convicted of murder. Well, Danny Savage is at Nottingham Crown Court for us now. Danny.
Yes, it was just after 12:30 this lunchtime when the verdict was delivered. The girl was told to stand and listen to what the jury had decided. She showed no reaction whatsoever when she was found guilty of both murders. In the public gallery, relatives of the victims were crying and sobbing and gasping, having listened to the details of this harrowing case. Liz Edwards and her daughter Katie were found murdered in their home in Spalding in April. They were both well-liked and adored each other. What makes this shocking crime so notorious, though, is that they were killed by a pair of 14-year-olds, a young couple with a grudge. The boy admitted murder. The girl denied it, but was today found guilty. Several weeks after the awful events here, the flowers have now gone and the property is being cleared. But because of the age of the accused, what happened here still dominates people's minds and conversations.
She's a nice lady.
Julie Blandford knew Liz Edwards and says she was a friendly, popular lady.
She's always very nice, kind, caring. If you've got a problem, you can always talk to her, sort of thing, and she's always nice and open.
And she has strong views on the two 14-year-olds who sat down to watch teen romance vampire films after they killed.
Scum. I've got nothing to say. He's just scum, mate. I hope he gets locked up and they throw the key away. I'll be honest, I really do. She could have had a bright future ahead of her. Then if this didn't happen, he could have had a bright future ahead of her. I just see it, they're throwing everything all away.
And they didn't just throw everything away on a whim. The two teenagers planned these murders in detail. They went and sat in a local McDonald's to plot. And on the night of the killings, the boy walked along this river in the dark to rendezvous with the girl, carrying kitchen knives to kill their victims. What happened next was described in court as cold, calculated, callous killings. The girl told police she'd felt like murdering for quite a while, and that a gun would have been easier. The knife was a better solution. Janet Blackshaw says 13-year-old Katie, who was killed, was a lovely girl and that her mother was very happy in a new relationship.
I did notice a change in her. She was a lot happier. So she met somebody she can trust, who loved her kids as much as she did, which I thought was really sweet.
13-year-old Katie was also a popular member of the local church.
Katie was just the most wonderful, gentle, loving, fabulous 13-year-old girl. Katie was the same at 13 as she was at 10 when she first came into my drama group. She's just so genuine.
The personal possessions of the victims have now gone from this end terrace in a cul-de-sac in a Lincolnshire town. But Liz Edwards, the mum who cared, and her daughter Katie will be fondly remembered here. Now, the 15-year-old boy pleaded guilty to both murders at the very beginning of this trial, so he played no further part and has not been sat in the dock throughout the last week. But both of these teenagers will be reunited for sentencing at a later date. That is yet to be decided when it's going to be. But they were 14 at the time, they're 15 now, and because of their age, they still cannot be publicly identified. Rita.
Danny, thank you. Danny Savage there. The cost of living has risen by its largest amount in almost 2 years. Annual inflation rose to 1% in September, up from 0.6% in August, pushed up by petrol, clothes and hotel prices. The Office for National Statistics said that so far there was no explicit evidence that it was the effect of the weaker pound, although, as our economics correspondent Andy Verity reports, upward price pressures are building.
This specialist coffee roaster in East London has done all it could to hold prices down. Because it bought its coffee beans last year when the pound was stronger, it hasn't yet had to raise its prices. But pressure is building. In September, inflation on the official measure, the Consumer Prices Index, was 1%, higher than expected. Much of that was because goods prices were only down by 0.5%, a smaller drop than before. And prices of services, driven by higher wages, were up 2.6%.
This is a roaster.
The drop in the value of the pound by nearly a fifth since the referendum is already pushing up the price of raw materials for importers like this one. That hasn't yet forced them to pass on higher costs to their customers, but it's likely to happen soon.
Well, at the end of the day, we buy our coffee forward. So we are buying next year's coffee today. We can't grow coffee in England. There's no way we can avoid buying it from Brazil, Ethiopia, Kenya, Central America. So coffee has gone up and the pound's gone down, so it's a lose-lose situation for a little guy like us.
Coffee has been so cheap to make for so long now that the price of it was bound to rise anyway, and that's been happening. With the weakness of the pound, it means more upward pressure on the price. Roasters can either respond by charging higher prices, or they can let the quality go and hope we don't notice the difference. Even if quality is maintained, the price of petrol to transport goods like coffee to consumers has risen year on year. The first time that's happened since 2013. That higher cost will either squeeze profits or push prices up further.
I think it's fair to say that the trajectory for inflation from here is likely to the upside, and that really is largely as the falls in the currency start to feed through to higher import prices. We've only just started seeing signs of that.
Prices for us may be rising, but to foreign buyers, expensive British fashion like Burberry has got much cheaper because of the weak pound, boosting its sales by 30%. Ryanair, on the other hand, has warned investors it'll make less profits than expected. Because its profits are priced in euros, the pounds we spend on its airfares no longer amount to as much. Andy Verity, BBC News.
Let's talk to our economics editor, Kamal Ahmed. Kamal, is this the start of a sustained period of price rises, do you think?
I think it is. Most economists are now predicting that by the end of next year, we could see inflation as high as 3.5%. And we've not seen those type of figures for many, many years. The reason is, as Andy said in his report, is what's called import inflation. We buy a huge amount of our fuel and energy from abroad. We buy a huge amount of our food from abroad, and therefore the prices of those imports are going up because of the weakness of sterling. The issue, I think, for Theresa May around these inflation figures today is this very important relationship between inflation and real income rises. Real incomes are rising at about 2% at the moment, so inflation of 1%, the public feels slightly better off year by year. As soon as inflation goes above that 2%, 2.3% real income growth, incomes start going down, real incomes start going down, people start to feel worse off. That's when inflation becomes politically toxic again.
OK, Kamal, thank you. One of England's largest mental health trusts has been criticised for failing to learn lessons after 10 of its patients killed 10 people in 9 years. A review says some risk assessments carried out by Sussex Partnership NHS Trust were inadequate. Signs of psychosis were not referred to a specialist unit and patients' families were often ignored. Our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan reports.
Mental health problems robbed Joe Goswell of his parents, Jonah of his grandparents. To make matters worse, they know it need not have happened. Roger Goswell stabbed his wife Susan to death at Christmas 2007 before killing himself. Today's report says the killing was predictable. Roger Goswell had a history of psychiatric problems and had repeatedly threatened to kill his wife.
If they predicted it, then they could have prevented it. And I think my mother's life, there's no question if that was the case, they could have saved it. And they haven't.
With my knife.
A police interview with Matthew Daly, who stabbed Don Locke to death last year after a minor car crash. Daly was under the care of Sussex Partnership NHS Trust at the time of the killing, and this review followed criticism of the trust in that case. Examining the killings, the authors found at least one death was preventable. The danger posed by psychiatric patients was severely underestimated, and patients and families were often ignored despite pleading for help. The Trust's chief executive has apologised and promised care will improve.
The central point for me is around culture and practice and ensuring that when something goes wrong, it's not localised to the area that it's gone wrong, but actually is learned right across the organisation, and that we're open to the fact that actually we need to learn and change practice in lots of cases.
The NHS didn't just fail the victims of these crimes, they let down their own patients as well. In several cases, these men and their families were crying out for support. Sussex Partnership did not provide that help, leading to such tragic consequences. A daughter, a brother, a father, a mother, all killed by mental health patients in Sussex. Some families may take legal action. Nothing, however, will undo the loss. Michael Buchanan, BBC News, Sussex.
US officials say the battle to retake the city of Mosul from so-called Islamic State is progressing ahead of schedule. The attack on the city began yesterday morning, 2 years after IS first took control of the city. Mosul is being attacked from two directions. Iraqi government forces are approaching the city from the south, while Kurdish Peshmerga fighters have been clearing villages of IS fighters on the northern approach to the city. They've been backed by airstrikes from the US-led coalition. Our diplomatic correspondent Caroline Hawley has the latest.
Day 2 after the battle for Mosul was declared, and so far, according to the Americans, the fight's gone well. An array of military forces are trying to take back areas around the city from IS. A string of villages have been captured to the east of Mosul by Kurdish fighters and to the south of the city by Iraqi government troops. They've been met in some places with rocket fire, suicide attacks and oil fires. IS is fighting back with propaganda too. These pictures apparently show daily life in Mosul, filmed by the militants. Aid agencies are concerned that when the fight comes to the city itself, IS will use the civilians trapped here as human shields. This man says the situation in Mosul is better than normal. But IS has also put out these pictures of a bridge they say was hit twice in American airstrikes over the past 2 days. Civilians are already on the move. These families have escaped a small town close to Qayyarah, the main base for Iraqi troops, as they advance north. And the UN is now preparing to provide shelter for the hundreds of thousands who might flee Mosul in the days and weeks ahead.
Well, up to 1 million possibly displaced is an enormous figure, and I don't think even the best well-laid plans would be able to accommodate everybody. Having said that, we're scrambling frantically to be as ready as we can. At this stage, we have 5 camps open. We have enough shelter spaces for about 130,000 people. Our plans in total would be able to shelter about 780,000 people.
This is the biggest military operation in Iraq since US forces withdrew from the country in 2011. If it works, it'll be a huge blow to IS. But it's still at the very earliest stage. The BBC is with Iraqi forces south of Mosul.
Well, they have so far cleared 10 villages. They have to clear another 70. Some of these villages are very small, just a few houses, before they even reach the outskirts of Mosul. Resistance has been pretty limited so far, and they are expecting the battle to be more intense the nearer they get to the city.
The International Committee of the Red Cross has appealed to all sides to show humanity in their fight. It warned that the world was watching. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent Ahmed Mayer is just outside Mosul for us now. And Ahmed, just give us the latest where you are.
Well, I'm just a few kilometers from one of the key fronts in the fight against the so-called Islamic State in Mosul. It's called Al-Khazir. It is southeast. It's nearly 39 kilometers southeast the city center of Mosul. And the latest now, the Kurdish forces from this front, Al-Khazir and other eastern and southeastern areas have made quick advances towards Mosul. They have recaptured at least 9 villages in the east of Mosul. This is on the one front. On another front, another key front, it is in the south of Mosul, Al-Qayyara front. The Iraqi forces, backed by American advisors and US-led airstrikes, managed also to recapture a string of villages out there. Now the strategy is to circle the city of Mosul from the south, from the east, and also from the north by the Kurdish forces to storm the city of Mosul. Maybe in days, maybe in weeks, we don't know yet.
Ahmed, thank you. Ahmed Mayer there. The time is just after 1:15. Our top story this lunchtime. A 15-year-old girl is found guilty of murdering Elizabeth Edwards and her 13-year-old daughter, Katie. And still to come, decision day on Heathrow. We'll find out whether there's to be a third runway next Tuesday.
In South today at 1:30, 3 more days of disruption on Southern Rail as members of the RMT go on strike again. And it's a treasure trove of Jurassic life. 2,000 fossils discovered by a plumber in Dorset.
Britain's Olympic and Paralympic athletes have just started parading through Trafalgar Square in London this lunchtime before heading to a reception with the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh at Buckingham Palace. Yesterday, thousands of people braved the rain and lined the streets of Manchester to celebrate Team GB and Paralympics GB successes. The athletes surpassed expectations in Rio by bringing home more medals than they won on home soil during the London 2012 Games. Ben Brown is in Trafalgar Square for us now. Ben.
Join me! Yeah, Rita, it's a fantastic atmosphere here in Trafalgar Square. The sun is shining and more than 300 stars and medalists of the Olympics and the Paralympics are here in Trafalgar Square to receive this rapturous reception from thousands of their fans who were glued to the televisions throughout the summer and those amazing games when Team GB and Paralympics GB surpassed their medal hauls from London 2012. Daniela Relf reports.
It's London, so how else would these athletes arrive? Buses filled with Olympians and Paralympians, ready for a second day of celebrations.
You know, it's so great to think that the whole of the British public have, you know, been behind all of Team GB and Paralympics GB, and to be able to like come and actually celebrate everyone's home and finish with their holidays and stuff. It's going to be a fun day.
Mofer is going to get gold for Great Britain again.
The success of Team GB and Paralympics GB has been well documented. Today's event will celebrate the gold medalists, but will also focus on the impact the Games had on women's sport and those who did far better than expected.
Yeah, well, the thing was for us, we had no idea really what was going to happen when we got out there. I mean, we backed ourselves and we knew we were going to give it our best, but it does feel a bit surreal still.
Once these athletes are finished here in Trafalgar Square, they'll do a quick change and head to Buckingham Palace. The final part of these Olympic and Paralympic celebrations will be a reception hosted by the Queen. It's become a tradition after every Olympics and Paralympics. Here, 4 years ago. Like then, the Queen will personally congratulate medalists. She'll be joined by other royals, including the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and Prince Harry.
I'm so excited. I really want a selfie with her, but I'm not sure I'm going to get away with that.
can try.
I'm definitely going to try. If you don't ask, you don't get.
London, of course, has its own Olympic memories. But as the bands of the Coldstream and Grenadier Guards played, today is all about celebrating the Rio success stories. Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Trafalgar Square.
Well, as you can see behind me on the stage there in the sunshine, all the medalists on the stage now being introduced to the crowd. And after this event here in Trafalgar Square, they'll be making their way to Buckingham Palace for the more formal reception with the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and Prince Harry. Rita, back to you.
Ben, many thanks. The government has said a decision on a third runway at Heathrow will be made next week. Well, let's speak now to our assistant political editor, Norman Smith. Norman, this is long awaited. Is there any sense which way this is going?
Well, Rita, you're right, it's long awaited. It has to be the longest running soap opera in British politics. Where to build this extra airport capacity in the southeast, at Heathrow or Gatwick. Next week, we are told there will be a decision. But here's the problem. It still remains a profoundly divisive issue at the highest echelons of government. So we know some cabinet ministers are passionately in favour of Heathrow. Others, like Boris Johnson, have threatened to lie down in front of the bulldozers. So Theresa May has decided to take a leaf out of David Cameron's Brexit handbook and allow cabinet ministers to argue and campaign on rival sides. But here's the key difference. She's only going to allow them to do it for a limited period. And what's not clear is after that limited period, whether she's going to stamp her foot and say, right, you've had your say, now you have to back me in the government position, or whether she will allow them a free vote. But clearly her hope is, by at least allowing cabinet ministers to argue their preferred case in public, to try and keep the cabinet together, to keep everyone happy. But you have to say, when David Cameron tried to pull off the same trick, didn't turn out that well for him. He lost his job and there was a near bloodbath in the higher echelons of the Tory party.
OK, Norman, thank you. Police are investigating an allegation of rape said to have taken place within a parliamentary office at Westminster. A man has been arrested and bailed. Well, our correspondent Danny Shaw is there. Danny, what more can you tell us about this?
Well, this allegation is being investigated by detectives from Scotland Yard. A young woman told police that she had been raped in the early hours of Friday in parliamentary offices here at Westminster. A man has been arrested, 23 years of age, and we understand that man is Sam Armstrong. He is a parliamentary assistant to the Conservative backbench MP Craig McKinley. Now, on Friday, this man was arrested and questioned by police, and Mr. McKinley's office here at Westminster was searched by detectives who obtained the appropriate permission first from the parliamentary authorities. Mr. Armstrong has been released on police bail for 3 months while the investigation continues.
Danny, thank you. Danny Shaw there. Voters in Batley and Spen will go to the polls on Thursday in a by-election following the death of the Labour MP Jo Cox. The Conservatives, Liberal Democrats and UKIP all said they would not be fielding a candidate. However, the English Democrats and the BNP both announced plans to contest the seat. Our political correspondent Adam Fleming reports.
At the train station, the way this constituency wants to be seen, courtesy of a mural in the underpass.
The place is dotted with towns and villages which look a bit like that. It's home to some famous brands like Johnston's Paints. Here you'll find the HQ of Fox's Biscuits. In Batley itself, there's quite a big Asian community, so there's a mosque, and it's also home to Batley Bulldogs rugby league team.
But there's also a tribute to Jo Cox, a reminder of why this by-election is happening. At the cafe next door to her office, the mums still remember the day she was killed.
It was really horrible. All kids were crying and everybody were upset. And when we got the text message from school saying that they were locking school down until further notice, it was scary. There's like you just want to be able to go and pick them up and bring them home, but we couldn't get into them.
And it means there's hardly any by-election buzz.
Have you even kind of noticed that anything is happening?
Not in Batley. I'll be truthful, not at all, no. I don't think anybody realises it's happening, to be fair.
At the time, politicians left flowers, and as a further mark of respect, the Conservatives, Lib Dems, UKIP and Greens aren't standing. Voters get the sentiment, but a few feel disenfranchised. Of the 10 candidates that are on the ballot paper, several are from smaller right-wing parties. And there's been a controversial leaflet. It purports to be from the Britain Stronger in Europe campaign, which no longer exists. Because it doesn't say who it's really from, it's been reported to the police. In normal times, this vote would tell us how the parties are faring in the Brexit era. But these aren't normal times here. Adam Fleming, BBC News, Batley.
And here's a list of all the candidates standing in the Batley and Spen by-election. You can find out more information, of course, on the BBC News website. The wife of the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has described accusations of sexual assault against him as lies. In an interview with US television, Melania Trump insisted that her husband was a gentleman. She also said that lewd comments Mr. Trump made about women in 2005 were unacceptable, but did not represent the man she knows. Frankie McCamley reports.
She's not the typical campaign spouse, but Melania Trump has stepped into one of the most traditional of political roles, the woman standing by her man.
Those words, they were offensive to me and they were inappropriate. And he apologized to me and I accept his apology.
The prospective First Lady, who is an important electoral asset, has given 2 high-profile interviews. It's after a video emerged earlier this month in which Donald Trump boasted about sexually assaulting a woman.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
I said to my husband that, the language is inappropriate. It's not acceptable. And I was surprised because that is not the man that I know. They were kind of a boy talk, and he was lead on, like egg on, from the host to say dirty and bad stuff.
He apologised and said he never actually did those things, but since, several women have come forward accusing him of sexual assault, including Summer Zevros, a former contestant on his reality show The Apprentice. The 46-year-old has been keeping a low profile since that speech to the Republican convention, which had more than a few similarities to Michelle Obama's 2008 address.
Press on many of the same values that you work hard for what you want in life.
The interviews come after a tough 2 weeks for the Trump campaign, which will be hoping to reassure voters who have just 3 weeks to decide who will be the next US president. Frankie McCamley, BBC News.
After 5 decades running a small photography business in Coventry and 20 years since he retired, a 94-year-old man is gaining international recognition. Next month we'll see the first exhibition of the work of Maganbhai Patel, better known as Master G. It's the first big event in Coventry's campaign to be City of Culture in 2021. Phil Mackey has been to meet him.
These portraits, taken decades ago, are now viewed as art. And Master G only had to wait until he was 94. It started out as a hobby, then it became a business. He lived upstairs with his family. The front room was his studio.
There is no Indian photographer. I was the first. And they come to me. And the people make happy, they like me.
This is the new Coventry.
Coventry in the 50s and 60s was thriving. Just rebuilt after the war, it attracted immigrants from all over the world.
The photographs don't just document the social history of an immigrant community, but they show the changing face of Coventry, which is why they're going to be shown as part of its 2021 City of Culture bid.
The pictures show how immigrants integrated, they capture their aspirations and the changing fashions.
The people had so much light and so much hope in their eyes. And then I love looking at all the photographs from the 1980s upwards, just because of the fashion sense of things.
They're a gateway into understanding Coventry and its Asian community. For 50 years, really important period of Coventry's history, and they capture that Asian community as they were living their lives.
Besides an exhibition in Coventry next month, his work is about to be shown in Italy, and he's been nominated for a prestigious prize in Mumbai, the city from which he embarked on his journey to England 66 years ago.
Very proud.
Did you enjoy photography?
Well, I am enjoying photography, everything, but I'm losing money a lot.
You had a great job, but you didn't make enough money.
Because of friendship.
Mates rates.
Yes. I can say that.
And after all these years, he still knows his way around a camera. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Coventry.
Just enjoying the toys.
Let's take a look at the weather now. Here's Phil Avery. Phil.
Rita, thanks very much. As they used to say on Morecambe and Mize, what do you think of it so far? It depends where you are, really. This was the artistic scene of the rain in Sheringham. If we just drive up the road a wee bit into Derbyshire, that was the view through somebody's window, Joe Jen. But it wasn't like it everywhere. It's not all doom and gloom. Once the rain has moved away, and it has moved away from some central and southern parts, as that portion of the front is cleared into the North Sea. But don't discount that bit in the north, because it's brought a combination of pretty wet and windy fare into parts of southern and western Scotland through the morning, and it will become the main player in the weather front across the north of England, the North Midlands, maybe the northeast of Wales through the afternoon. What does it leave behind? Well, certainly across central and western parts of Scotland, plenty of hefty showers there, the best of the dry weather through Aberdeen and Angus. For Northern Ireland, a few scattered showers here, a little bit of brightness around. Then we've got that area of cloud and significant wind as well, a really unfortunate combination, a distinct autumnal chill there about proceedings. But then further south than that, for the greater part of the afternoon, 1 or 2 showers, yes, but quite a bit of sunshine. Fewer showers than we had yesterday, but a much fresher feel wherever you're spending the afternoon. And then we'll flick the remnants of that feature down and across many parts in the south to give a scattering of showers, not much more than that, and what is going to be quite a chill night. Even in the towns and cities, as you see, single figures abound. These are the major players for the middle part of the week. Don't worry about the big area low pressure behind me. It's reinforcing that building high pressure, though, coming to dominate central and western parts, but it won't affect the east, where you've still got the low pressure, and around that some pretty strong winds down past the eastern shores, and later on in the day some pretty hefty showers as well. Further west and into central parts, yes, 1 or 2 lighter showers, but quite a bit of dry weather around as well. Not overly warm, you'll notice again, with what wind there is coming somewhere out of the north. And into the latter part of the week, the major players are there. That high pressure dominating across central and western parts, that low pressure still not moving very far from the east. So across the northern and western parts of the British Isles, it's the acceptable face of autumn. It's the mist and mellow fruitfulness, the wee bit of frost in the morning. But anywhere near that area of low pressure, well, it's a breezy, showery combo. It's the other face of autumn. Now, that's the chart for Thursday, if the truth were known, but I could almost extend that through Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Not a great deal of difference, not a great deal of change, because those major players in our weather for the next few days really aren't moving very far, very fast. That's the latest. Rita, over to you.
Thank you, Phil. A reminder of our main story this lunchtime. A 15-year-old girl is found guilty of murdering Elizabeth Edwards and her 13-year-old daughter, Katie. Well, that's all from BBC News at 1, but you can see all the coverage of the London Parade to celebrate Britain's Olympic and Paralympic athletes throughout the afternoon on the BBC News channel. So it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we can now join the BBC's news teams where you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.